I think it can be difficult to identify whether or not you have sensory differences, even when they're debilitating. And that makes sense because your sensory experience, it's your normal. You know, you can't just hop into another person's POV to check if the sky seems equally as oppressively bright today. You can't hear the clattering of cutlery in the dining hall through another person's ears, or brain, I should say. And the thing is, often if you point out your sensory triggers, the people around you will agree and empathize. Oh, now that you mention it, that ticking clock is really annoying. Even if they were easily blocking it out a moment ago and might not have noticed it if you hadn't brought it to their attention. And of course, everybody genuinely does have sensory likes and dislikes. I'm not sure I've ever met a neurotypical person who speaks highly of velvet, and most people have at least one food that gives them the ick. Sometimes the only clue that you're living through something more challenging is that people treat you as if you're difficult. You complain too much, you're grumpy, you're oversensitive, you're dramatic, you're highly strung. Why can't you just relax and have fun? Enjoy the fireworks. Everyone likes explosions, yay! I went through my life with zero idea that I had sensory differences, even though they're glaringly obvious on reflection. I mean, my blackout blind was nearly constantly down in my bedroom growing up, in favor of my soft, warm, bedside light. So I thought it might be a good idea to discuss common sensory triggers for autistic people and ADHDers and how they might feel. I didn't want to base it entirely on my experience though, because I am not the ultimate autistic. You don't even technically have to have sensory issues to be diagnosed. So I asked over on the community tab if you wouldn't mind telling me about your experiences with sensory hypersensitivities. And over 2,000 people responded to my little survey. Thank you so much. I can't believe so many people took the time to do that. A number of people said even just filling out that form made them realize they struggle a lot more with the sensory stuff than they thought. And you know what? If you don't realize, you can't look after yourself. You can't accommodate yourself. This video will be specifically focused on a sensory hypersensitive experience, so feeling like your senses are overactive rather than hypersensitive or underactive to stimuli. I do have a separate video where I go through different types of stimming that autistic people and ADHDers might do. So that video kind of covers the sensory seeking side of stuff. On our poll, 69.6% of people said they were more hypersensitive. Only 3.7% said mainly hyposensitive, but it was a survey about hypersensitivities, so keep that in mind. Many autistic people feel like their sensory experience is a mix of both. If we're super immersed in something, we might not notice that somebody is trying to talk to us, but then a few minutes later, we might become completely distracted by the sound of a dripping tap. We may dread the sound of the lawnmower, but love blasting loud music through our headphones. The sensory stuff can seem pretty paradoxical, even hypocritical sometimes. When I asked which senses cause you the most difficulties, and I realize now I put senses plural, but then you could actually only select one option. Whoops, apologies for that. But we did get some really interesting data. 70.9% of respondents said sound was the sense that bothered them the most. And I probably would have guessed that. It's definitely the one that bothers me the most, but I wouldn't have guessed it would be that high. So let's start there. Let's start with sounds. Which sounds are the most triggering for autistic people and ADHDers? And how do auditory sensitivities actually feel? As you might imagine, sudden and loud noises were very unpopular. Fireworks, very relevant if you live in the UK. We just had Guy Fawkes, remember the 5th of November, and you can't forget. Your neighbours will not let you forget. I used to be terrified of fireworks as a child. Sometimes we would go and watch displays, and I would spend the entire day at school feeling so anxious about it. And I've told my mum about this since, and she's like, why didn't you just tell me? We just wouldn't have gone. It wasn't that important. But I don't know, I guess it just felt like something that I should be able to endure, that I was expected to go through. And I think I felt that way about a lot of the sensory stuff. Everyone else is fine with it. Balloons popping is another obvious example. I still hate it now, but was terrified of this as a child.
Where's the balloon? I like it. You don't like it?
You might have a reaction to it that seems a bit dramatic, like jumping or shouting out or something. I think I'm often just more on edge than the people around me, and my nervous system is just ready, on alert, ready to respond to stuff like that. And I have seen autistic people describe other sudden loud noises as feeling like someone is popping a balloon right beside your head. Like, you know, maybe the sound of somebody slamming a car door. Neighbors using machinery, getting grand ideas to do loud DIY is another one. I used to dread Saturday mornings. This is supposed to be a good day. I'm not at school and you're ruining it. Notifications on your phone, again, could give you a feeling like somebody has popped a balloon right by your head. I always have notifications turned off. Your phone vibrating for a phone call, similarly. That might just be because I hate phone calls, but it makes my blood run cold. Could be any sort of alarms. This might be an alarm on your phone, house alarms, car horns, train horns. Yes, even the trains can let us down sometimes. Actually, trains let people down a lot. I guess that's the people though, not the trains. Sirens, somebody knocking on your front door or ringing your doorbell, banging pots and pans, again clattering cutlery, clinking glasses. Yeah, babies crying I think is quite unpopular. I've definitely heard Abby from Love on the Spectrum despair about this. Children in general can just be very loud. Sudden loud traffic noises, motorbikes, backfiring exhaust. I hate that. It makes me feel so on edge and panicked. And things like hair dryers and hand dryers as well. Hand dryers in public toilets always felt very scary to me as a child. Somebody dropping something. Lyrics at the moment, just, I don't know what's going on. Like, I can be clumsy as well. I also am diagnosed with dyspraxia, but I feel like he's going through a phase of dropping things all the time on the hard floor, and it's so jarring. It feels kind of like something yanks, something drops inside of me. I feel like I get tangled up inside, and it takes a while for that to pass out of my system. Somebody on the survey described it as feeling like they're being shot at. You might have a reaction that seems to the people around you as disproportionate, over the top, dramatic. As I say, you might cry out, you might scream, you might jump, you might run away. I think we're often quicker to panic and end up in fight or flight. Another thing that came up a lot was disliking overlapping sounds, overlapping conversations, crowd noises. Like, it can just sound like this buzzing, pulsing onslaught. When I was in college, I used to avoid the cafeteria. Actually, it was where Lewis used to hang out, my husband, most of the time, and that's one of the reasons why, even though we met in college, we actually didn't spend that much time together, because he used to always like to hang out there. Maybe we would have got together sooner if he hadn't based himself there. High-pitched noises also came up. We've recently moved in our bathroom. The spotlights do a little the sound of fluorescent lights, the buzz and the hum of electronics. A few people even mentioned being irritated by their own tinnitus. I do generally find myself irritated by my own sounds, especially if I have a cough or hiccups or something like that. I'm like, oh, shut up. I'm done with you. Heavy bass in music also came up. Hate it when people are driving around with like... Speaking of auditory sensitivities, we have the perfect sponsor for today's video, Loop earplugs. I bought my first pair of Loop earplugs last year with my own money, and I absolutely love them. They look so good. I had a family member ask me if they were earrings at a family gathering, and importantly, they work. I remember waiting in the merch queue at the Eras tour, and it was so loud. There were so many overlapping conversations going on around me. I popped in my Loop earplugs, and it was such a relief. The amount of energy that you can conserve when you're out in public and you're not being bombarded by sounds is amazing to me. So I have a couple of pairs. I have the Loop Switch 2. These ones are designed to give you ultimate control. We like control. And you don't need any apps or batteries with these. It's just the one pair of earplugs with a manual dial and 3 adjustable sound settings. There's engage mode for when you want to kind of take the edge off but still be able to chat. There's experience mode. This is ideal for concerts. You protect your hearing, but it's also a better experience. The sound is more crisp and better quality. And finally, these have quiet mode for maximum peace and quiet when you really need to focus. There's a range of colors, but I have them in emerald, very wicked coded. I will absolutely be taking these to the cinema with me for part 2. I also have the Loop Quiet 2. These are ideal for napping, focus, travel, and when you're feeling overstimulated. No electronics involved. They're subtle. They don't stick out of your ears. They come in this lovely little carrier case that you can attach to your keys or your bag. Loop earplugs are of course reusable and easy to clean, and they come with 4 different sizes of ear tips: extra small, small, medium, and large, so you can make sure you've got the perfect fit. If you've been thinking about getting yourself a pair of Loop earplugs, this might be the perfect time, especially if you have a bunch of family gatherings or Christmas work events coming up. They'd also be a really nice, thoughtful gift for the neurodivergent person in your life if you know they struggle with auditory sensitivities. If you'd like to get 20% off your purchase from Loop, then you can use my link in the description and my code LoopX Megan, all caps. This time of year is overstimulating enough, so why not give them a go? Now, if you have auditory hypersensitivities, you might also have something called misophonia. Not all autistic people do. According to this 2025 meta-analysis, it's between 13 and 36% of us, so quite a wide range there. But other studies have found a correlation between severity of misophonia and autistic traits in the general population. Misophonia is a decreased tolerance to certain sounds, and these sounds trigger very strong negative emotional and or physical reaction in you. Rage is a very common one. That's definitely how it is for me, this sudden and unexpected flare or prickling of rage, and the sense of wanting to crawl out of my own skin, like the annoyance is itchy, unbearably itchy. Someone on the survey actually said that their auditory sensitivities make them feel itchy inside their bones. It's not like a literal itch, it's like an internal feeling. Sometimes I'll say things like it feels like my nervous system has been put in a blender. But for you, it might not be rage, and you may also experience things like disgust, repulsion, or anxiety. Basically, these seemingly innocuous sounds send you into fight or flight. Quite inconvenient. Some examples of misophonia triggers are somebody slurping, somebody chewing, cutlery scraping, hearing somebody yawn or bite or pick their nails, other people coughing, getting hiccups, sniffing, basically any nose or mouth sounds. Certain words can set it off, especially P sounds. I cannot stand, apologies to my poor mum, I cannot stand the way she says the word because. She says it like, because. It's usually when she's saying something helpful, but it annoys me. Breathing. I cannot stand it when other people breathe. It makes you sound so horrible. Unfortunately, it's true. Yeah, but sometimes Lewis starts breathing really heavily because he's got headphones on, and so I think he loses the self-awareness of the volume of his own breathing. And I'm like, Lewis, please stop breathing. Oh no. Swallowing, joint cracking. That makes me feel sick. Whistling. Whistling is one of the worst triggers to me. Humming can set it off. Some people even said singing as well. Whispering. Ooh, whispering can be bad. And sometimes Lewis is like trying to be accommodating and he knows that I'm really focusing on something and he doesn't want to disturb me, so he'll whisper to our son or something like that. And I'm like, it's the thought that counts. But whispering is potentially worse than had you just spoken the words. I hate whisper singing as well. Like people singing under their breath, snoring, dogs barking can be another one. Dogs eating, slurping, licking up their food, cats meowing. I have to put my headphones on whenever I'm feeding our cat because she just screams. And someone else on the survey described it as their cat screaming at them as they prepare their food. I don't know what kind of sound their cats make. Maybe it does sound more like a scream, but it feels to me when my cat is incessantly meowing at me, it feels like I am being screamed at. But I don't know, maybe she thinks she's having this great chat with me about how excited she is about the food. Maybe she's saying thank you. I don't know. Now I feel sad. Sorry, Zena, for calling you out on this list. But speaking of it feeling like the cat is screaming at us, I think that can sometimes be a thing that autistic people with sensory sensitivities do that confuses neurotypical people, using quite dramatic language to describe things. Like saying that a certain sound is attacking you, because that's how it feels. That's how it feels in your nervous system. But to the people around you, that can be confusing, and it can be a bit like, just calm down, get over it. Speaking of animal sounds, birds singing. When you're trying to sleep, if you've stayed up too late, you've been hyper focusing into the night. Ooh, when the birds start going. Maybe it's just because you feel like you've made a mistake and you've messed up your sleeping schedule. Sometimes the poor birds, they do great. Repetitive sounds such as a tap dripping or a ticking clock, typing or clicking a mouse, rustling of paper or plastic bags, styrofoam rubbing together. Somebody said that this sound makes them feel sick. For me, it's like I can feel the sound in my teeth and it makes me want to clench my teeth. And some people on the survey said that certain sounds can give them a pain in their teeth. Squeaking noises can also set it off, such as shoes squeaking on a floor. Someone said coat hangers on metal racks. Apologies to Scotland, but somebody said bagpipes, and to that I say yes. Walking through the streets of Edinburgh after the Eras tour, I was not a huge fan. Very busy. But I appreciate the culture, and it is a constant reminder that you are actually in Scotland. Little sounds caused by movement can set off misophonia, so like somebody sliding their hand along a surface. A lot of people called out puffer jackets, and I was so grateful. Thank you so much. I cannot stand the sound of the material rubbing together. Oh, it is bad. I do sometimes have to politely ask Lewis if he will remove his coat once he gets home and get changed into something else. And I have exiled many different jackets and coats from my wardrobe for being too noisy. I had like this faux leather jacket that came from this South African clothing store called JJ's, and I don't think it lasted very long at all. When a clothing item wrongs me, it does not last in the rotation very long. It gets sold. The sound of TV or music in another room can be irritating. I find it really frustrating because my brain just continually wants to zone into that other sound, but then I can't quite actually hear it, so I can't actually listen to it, but I can't not listen to it either. You might really dislike it when people make phone calls in public. I really cannot stand it when Poor Lewis is now getting called out. He loves to play his videos out loud. There's a lot of memes about boyfriends and men, I'm joking, doing this in general, playing their videos out loud. I'm like, Lewis, please listen to some headphones. Because I've always, my whole life, I've made an effort to try and wear headphones when possible so I don't annoy people with the sounds of my music or my audiobook or whatever I'm listening to. And I've realized that that's probably kind of a double empathy thing. I've been trying to protect the poor people in my life from the feelings that I experience when they play things out loud that they don't actually experience. So I've been going out of my way to try and protect their poor ears when they don't actually relate to those awful feelings that I get from it. And yeah, Lewis actually quite likes it often when I play things out loud because he listens to a little bit of it, and he's somebody who can get very enthusiastic about things that other people are into, so I think he often quite enjoys it. Like sometimes when we've been on holiday, he'll start listening to my audiobook with me, which is really sweet. He's very kind. He just sometimes wears puffer jackets. Again, mechanical sounds, neighbors doing stuff, #neighbors doing stuff can also set off misophonia. So getting grand ideas to mow their lawn, how dare they trim their hedges, leaf blowers, again, drilling, any sort of construction noise. Those noises can sometimes be sudden and give you a fright, but also that ongoing sound can be very unpleasant. Someone described it as sounds that are constant but slightly varying. I think for some reason my brain really zones into sounds like that. Like your brain really wants to know, how is it going to vary next? The sounds of vacuums and blenders can also be annoying, particularly if someone else is doing it and it's not you and it's not in your control. Fans, the constant sound of fans going. I guess this can also be computer fans, the sounds of the bins being collected, or the vehicle reversing sounds and all the beeping. My car, specifically my car, shouting at me about everything all the time, and at this point it's like you're just kind of crying wolf. At some point you just need to be quiet. It has this awful thing, which I think is a new regulation, where it beeps every time you go over the speed limit, but the thing is it's wrong about the speed limit. So you're just getting beeped at for no reason. My worst misophonia moment was in South Africa. I had stayed up until 5 a.m. talking to Lewis on Skype. This was when we were first getting together. So I was extremely tired, and I think tiredness can often make sensory sensitivities worse. And I woke up to the sound of somebody sweeping the floor with a broom outside, and it was such a scratchy, scraping sound. It felt like it was scraping the insides of my brain. Traffic noise is another one. You might struggle to sleep with traffic noise, and it's very difficult with these sounds that trigger misophonia to zone them out, if not impossible. And apparently the closer you are to somebody, the more likely their sounds are to annoy you. So you may very well end up falling out with your loved ones over the way they slurp their tea. However, obviously your reaction is not something you're doing on purpose. I think that can be really hard for people who don't experience it to understand. And I get it, you want to be able to just make sounds in your own house. Ironically, silence also came up on this survey as quite unpopular, I guess because it's never really truly silence. It just makes other sounds more noticeable, like the electronics and things like that. That was me when I was in college. I didn't like to go to the cafeteria. I went to the library instead, which was supposed to be in complete silence, and it was silent in quotation marks, but people were rustling papers, coughing, snorting, doing all sorts, dropping their pens. And so I would put my headphones on and listen to music, and it was easier for me to concentrate with that constant sound. And at home I would never choose to play music while I was trying to concentrate on something, especially not music with lyrics, but it was easier for me to concentrate with the music playing than it was for me to concentrate with people sniffing and sneezing and coughing, because it's more predictable, I suppose. So some of the ways that auditory sensitivities made people feel, in the words of this person, very, very, very bad. Someone said anxious or like it's hard to breathe. Someone described themselves as a scared cat. Yeah, again, I think it can be like a dramatic reaction because it sends us into fight or flight. People said it made them feel dizzy, that they get goosebumps or their hair stands on end. Skin crawling or itching, like I said earlier, came up quite a lot. Having the urge to cover or block your ears. You might feel anger and it might seem to come out of nowhere. You might feel like you want to cry. Obviously, sensory overload can trigger autistic meltdowns and shutdowns, which I have a separate video about here. You might feel like you lose energy, become fatigued, drained, like it's difficult for you to take in any new information. And I think it makes sense to me now why I used to feel so tired in certain environments. It just feels a bit like it's chipping away at you and you're subdued by it. Okay, onto the visual hypersensitivity stuff. Only 6.6% of people said that this was the sense that affected them the most. But as I said, sound completely dominated at 70%. Now, something that I didn't actually know until I started researching for this video, misophonia has a visual twin called misokinesia, which means hatred of movements. And it's also been described as a sensitivity to seeing others fidget. So it's not a sensitivity to your own movements, but seeing other people move, especially small repetitive movements like somebody biting their nails. So you can imagine, again, this might seem quite hypocritical in an autistic person as we often like to move and fidget. And people will often have both. Misokinesia often co-occurs with misophonia. And I couldn't understand why I often felt this flare of rage or irritation when I'm talking to Lewis and he's moving, basically, most often scrolling on his phone. For a while, I thought it must just be like a moral thing of like, I'm talking to you, I want your full attention, I wish you'd put your phone down. But it happens even when I know he's paying full attention to me, when I know he's listening and responding to what I'm saying. So I just didn't really understand it. And yeah, I felt hypocritical because I fidget, I stim, and I talk about doing so on this channel. Why should he not have the right to move? But now it makes sense to me. Similar to misophonia, I think it's just very distracting. It's impossible to ignore that movement, and it triggers fight or flight. I also get this with flashing lights. Say I forget to turn my headphones off and I leave them on the coffee table and the little blue light is flashing on and off just in my peripheral vision. I cannot block it out. I can't concentrate. Even if the room is bright and there's lots of other things going on around me, that little blue light is super, super loud to me and I have to turn it off straight away. I don't know if anyone else can relate, but I think movement in my peripheral vision might be more upsetting to me generally. Maybe there's some primal reason that my nervous system doesn't like it. Seems sus. Why are you there? Other movements that might set off misokinesia include somebody jiggling their leg, swinging their arms. Hopefully me talking with my hands in my videos doesn't set it off for you. You'll have to set me down somewhere and just listen to me while you do something else, if so. Seeing somebody play with their hair, tapping their fingers on a desk, bouncing a tea bag in a mug, or seeing somebody chewing gum. This is how somebody described their misokinesia in a BBC article. When I see someone making really small repetitive movements, such as my husband bending his toes, I feel physically ill. I hold it back, but I want to vomit. I wonder if this also explains why I hate having somebody walk behind me. They don't even have to be that close, and it feels like they're breathing down my neck. It gives me the creeps. I often have to just stop and let them pass. And it's happened a few times where someone's right behind me and they're also whistling. A few people in the survey also mentioned hating having somebody hovering behind you, hovering over you while you're trying to do something. I absolutely experienced this too, and I wonder if this could be partly why. Yeah, it just kind of gives me the creeps. In college, when I would spend time in the IT suites, I often wouldn't get much work done because I would feel deeply unsettled by the fact that somebody could be looking over my shoulder. But other more general visual triggers that were popular or unpopular, I don't know, in the survey include brightness. That was definitely the most frequently mentioned. A lot of people said specifically bright sunshine. I actually really like sunshine. The sun gives me a lift. It makes me feel happy, but I don't live in a particularly sunny place. Maybe I would feel differently if I did. The thing that I really dislike in England is the white, solid white sky when it's cloudy and it reflects off everything on the lines on the road and parking spots. It makes me feel really, really tired. These were probably the days where I was most likely to close my blackout blinds during the day as a child and put on my nice cozy bedside light. Fluorescent lights and white lighting in general came up. Horrible, yes. Bright car headlights, especially when driving at night. I spoke about my experience with this and driving quite a bit over on my podcast on Patreon. Me and my husband did 2 quite long episodes about our experience with driving as an autistic person versus him as a neurotypical person. Overwhelming and clashing colours also came up a lot, and it's just so ironic, isn't it? Because so much of the autism awareness stuff is really ugly, really bright, in your face colours and puzzle pieces. Flickering lights also came up a lot. When I was on holiday this past summer, I actually took a video in anticipation that at some point I will mention this on my channel. We had to move tables. I think we moved twice because the sun was blaring in and they had a ceiling fan and it was making this awful flickering. I felt so nauseous. I'll share a clip of it now just so you know what I'm talking about, but it's awful. I just watched it back again then and I'm like, ah. Sunlight flickering through a tree-lined street can also be unpleasant. And this hatred for flickering has a name. It is called flicker vertigo. It's an imbalance in brain cell activity caused by exposure to low frequency flickering or flashing of a relatively bright light. It can make you feel sick, blink rapidly, and in rare cases have more serious effects like seizures. Apparently this has even caused a few helicopter crashes. Some neurodivergent people also experience their vision going a bit funny when looking at black and white patterns. For example, this awful cushion that I have that for some reason lives in my house, or black text on a white document or a white page. Staring at the squares in my maths book at school used to sometimes make me feel sick. It might seem like the patterns or the words are moving around. This is sometimes called Erlin syndrome, but whether that is actually a real thing is up for debate. But patterns seemingly going a bit funny does seem to be a visual hypersensitivity thing. If you have visual hypersensitivities, you might also hate mess and visual clutter. This came up quite a lot. I absolutely cannot deal with mess in my environment during my PMDD time of the month. Again, it gives me a very similar feeling to the misophonia sound stuff, like an itching, skin crawling feeling. It's overwhelming. It just feels like it's impossible for me to rest unless everything is perfectly in its place, which it's never going to be in my household. So it's painful. Visual hypersensitivities might also make you feel dizzy. You might become anxious or panic. You might get eye strain or headaches, even migraines. Or you might just become really tired. The bright white sky thing always just makes me feel kind of run down. Okay, let's talk about touch. According to the poll, 13.2% of people said that touch is the sense that bothers them the most, and it was the second most frequently selected after sound. And the most commonly mentioned tactile triggers were light touch. Again, this might give you that skin crawling feeling or like your hairs are standing on end. I feel like it's unexpected touch, especially if it's from behind. I used to hate it at primary school when we'd line up to go into assembly or something and someone would start pushing, start trying to nudge you forwards, and I think bumping into things can also be a kind of unexpected touch. I find this very frustrating, especially say when I'm trying to walk down a narrow train aisle and I have a lot of bags and it's kind of unavoidable that I'm gonna bump into things, or if you're sitting on the train and then someone bumps into you while walking down the aisle. I just generally find having to maneuver my body to get around a bunch of obstacles quite taxing, quite frustrating. You might feel like you hate all physical contact and hugs. Some people who responded to the survey definitely said that. I personally don't mind hugs. Maybe it's just my people pleasing tendencies and I'm like, thank goodness somebody has accepted me literally with open arms I now feel whole for 30 seconds. For me, it's definitely more the light touch that I have a problem with. And speaking of light touch, air blowing on you, again, it feels like somebody is breathing down my neck. My mom used to love opening windows to air the room out. And yeah, like I do this sometimes in my own house too, but our window downstairs in our living room used to be directly behind the sofa, and she'd open it all the time, a crack to let air in. And yeah, it literally felt like someone was behind me going on the back of my neck, and it gave me the creeps. But I also really dislike it when somebody opens the window in the car, and windy days in general. Going into school on a windy day and waiting outside the classroom for a million years before the teacher would finally let you in, and having your hair like blow across your face. If you're sensitive to touch, you might really hate uncomfy clothing and find yourself gravitating to wearing more comfy things like tracksuits and hoodies or leggings and t-shirts. I am pretty much always in my pajamas. Even when I'm filming these videos, I have nice outfit on top, pajamas on the bottom. You might dislike tight clothing and clothing seams and tags on clothing. I think feeling restricted by clothing generally can be frustrating. Sometimes I don't even know why I don't like certain pieces of clothing. I just fall out with them and they must be exiled from the wardrobe. Collars and things brushing up against your neck came up quite a lot on the survey. A lot of hatred for polyester and for denim as well. I absolutely hate wearing jeans, especially a really stiff pair of jeans. And then the button and the zip against your stomach. I have endometriosis, I'm often bloated. That life is not for me. Even leggings feel like they're digging in. I've tried to have denim jackets in my wardrobe a couple of times and they have not lasted. Again, I think they can be a bit noisy sometimes and they just feel restrictive and it's just not cozy. Corduroy and velvet, and especially crushed velvet, wool and scratchy sweaters. Microfiber came up a lot. Some people don't like certain fluffy fabrics. Cotton wool, chalk, styrofoam, sand and grainy textures. My shampoo bottle, I love the shampoo that I use, but the label is kind of sandpapery, and yeah, whenever I touch it, like with cotton wool, I can feel it in my teeth. Slimy textures, for example, you might hate it when you're washing the dishes and you accidentally touch a bit of floating food in the sink. And soggy materials might not be your friend, like a dish sponge. And you might hate cooking with slimy foods such as raw eggs or chicken as well. I remember having to cook chicken in school and touching the raw chicken. I did not expect it to feel like that. Cat food, gross for many sensory reasons. I wash my hands so many times while I prepare my cat's food while she screams at me, but I have my headphones on, so it's okay. You might hate having hair on your neck and prefer having your hair tied back. Sometimes autistic people talk about always separating their hair like this. I like to do that quite a lot as well, so you don't feel it on your neck and back. When I was a child, I hated having my hair down. I always had to have it in a ponytail. It just made me feel gross. Even though my scalp is very sensitive, I find brushing and styling my hair pretty painful. I used to find it excruciating and complain a lot when my mom tied my hair up, but I also hated having it down, so I was prepared to go through that every day. I don't know if anyone else relates, but most neurotypical people in my life speak about going to the hairdressers as if it's this lovely, relaxing experience. I cannot stand it. Often hairdressers have quite long nails, so like when they're washing your hair, it can be really painful. Water sliding down your sleeve. Showers, generally, some neurodivergent people avoid showers because they hate it so much. I love being in the shower. I like the feel of it. We didn't have a shower growing up until I was 12, and I would sometimes shower at my dad's house and I'd be like, oh my goodness, this is the most wonderful thing. We did have a bath, so I did wash myself, don't worry. But I do not like coming out of the shower. I don't like having wet hair afterwards. I get dressed as quickly as I can and I usually will put on 2 layers so I can't feel any water dripping down my back. I'm sure some neurodivergent people do, but I really can't relate to Lewis. He sits in his towel for ages rather than, rubbing the towel on his skin and drying himself. Like that's kind of what the towel is for. He lets himself air dry but sits within the towel and just basically uses it as a blanket. I could not relate to sitting there dripping wet. You might also really hate being sweaty. I hate having greasy hair as well. I've gone through phases of my life where I've avoided showering, and then also a lot of phases where I feel like I need to shower every day because I can't stand having any sort of grease on my hair, kind of makes my scalp feel a bit itchy sometimes, and I just feel aware of it sitting there. And I think a lot of people feel a similar way about body lotions and moisturizers. Quite a few people said they don't like brushing their teeth and brushing their teeth makes them gag, but then also quite a few people said they really hate having dirty teeth. Wet socks. Now, food textures could also fit into this category. They do touch the inside of your mouth, but I'm going to lump those in with taste. But before we focus on that, let's talk about smell. 7.3% of respondents said that this was the sense that bothered them the most. I think my sense of smell bothers me a lot. This might be my second choice after sound, personally. If you also have a hypersensitive nose, then some smells that might bother you that came up on the survey include artificial fragrances, like perfume, particularly male perfume, came up quite a lot. I absolutely hated getting changed for PE in high school because people would spray so much body spray in the changing rooms. In the guys' changing rooms, it would be all the Lynx sprays, and then for the girls, it would be all the Impulse sprays. And yeah, you felt like you were eating it. You could taste it. Home air fresheners, those little plugins that people have, they make me sneeze as well instantly. And I feel like I can feel them in my lungs. I feel them become one with my body, and it feels like being poisoned. I think that was how someone else described it on the survey as well, and I completely agree. I do wonder sometimes if I'm also internally hypersensitive to the things that I'm breathing in, or are they affecting me the same as they affect everyone else, but I'm just more aware of it. I'm not sure. I'm quite sensitive to the scent of cleaning products. People mentioned bleach, scented candles. I love having candles on because it's so pretty and it's nice to watch, but it often gives me a headache. You might also hate the smell of alcohol. There's a very distinctive, almost metallic smell often in clubs and bars, which I'm assuming is spilt alcohol. You might also despise the smell of cigarettes, vapes as well, that sickly sweet smell. A lot of people said they really dislike the smell of gasoline. I quite like the smell of petrol, like at the petrol station, but the smell of like car exhaust fumes, no. Obviously not a fan of that. The smell of garbage, obviously nobody likes that smell, but to me, if the bin is really, really stinky, I can't block it out in the same way that Lewis can. I'm like, okay, we have to do something about this because it smells really bad, and Lewis will be like, oh, I don't notice anything. That's also another sign that you might have sensory hypersensitivities, you know, if you're frequently pointing things out and other people are kind of acting like, what? You feel like you're in a horror movie trying to tell everyone about this ghost you've seen, and everyone's like, I've not seen it. I don't experience that. It's like, okay, well, I do. It's there. But I don't know. Lewis might have a particularly bad sense of smell because we once had a gas leak and he was like, why does it smell like onions? I was like, Lewis, that's gas. That's not onions. We lived to tell the tale, thank goodness. You might absolutely hate the smell of public bathrooms. Now, I don't think anybody particularly loves the smell of toilets, but sometimes for autistic people, it will literally stop you from using the bathroom even when you need to. You might be quite sensitive to musty smells, like the smell of mold. Some people in the survey said they actually quite like it. The smell of old buildings. Someone else on the survey said they hate the smell of new cars. The new car smell. Oh my goodness. I used to say this as a child, that the smell of new cars makes me feel sick, and nobody knew what the hell I was talking about. So thank you. I feel validated after all of these years. You might struggle with the smell of people, smell of sweat. Sometimes the high school corridors when we were all packed together like sardines, not a good place to be. You might be quite sensitive to other people's bad breath or even your own bad breath. I remember having quite a few teachers who must have drank a lot of coffee, and coffee, I feel, can give people a very specific pooey smelling breath. It smells like poo to me. And I remember teachers kind of coming in close, maybe to help me with a worksheet or something, and explain it to me, and just trying not to recoil in repulsion at the smell of their coffee breath. Food smells in general, I think personally for me, this is probably the worst. Having to smell other people's foods that I would never eat, especially fishy smells, tuna sandwiches in school. My stepdad used to sometimes cook lamb shanks. I can still smell them now when I think about it. That made me feel very nauseous. The smell of eggs came up quite a lot on the survey. Bacon can also be overwhelming. And when I'm confronted with overwhelming smells like that, I often just feel tired again, subdued, like I maybe don't have quite so much energy to continue on with the day. Kaylin has quite a good short about how a bad smell can contribute towards an autistic meltdown. And to me, it can feel quite similar to having like a frustrating background noise, like an ongoing unpleasant smell in the background is distracting. I feel like my brain keeps wanting to tell me about it as if it's new information. And again, I just can't really zone it out. So it reduces my capacity to be able to deal with other frustrations and obstacles in my day. The smell of boiled vegetables, also not a good one, quite farty, I would say. The smell of vinegar also came up. Pet food obviously is awful. It like smells the same as it does when it comes out the other end, which is interesting. Quite a few people also mentioned the smell of rubber and some plastic smells. And as I say, these smells might make you nauseous or queasy, they might give you a headache, they might make you feel dizzy, and they might lead to you avoiding certain spaces. I remember as a child, I thought that I might want to be a teacher one day, and then I went into the staff room for some reason, and it just smelled so gross, like everyone's lunches that they'd heated up in the microwave combined with the coffee smell. And I was like, no, I'm not going to be a teacher. It was a serious thought that I had at the time. No, actually, someone said that bad smells make them feel depressed. And yeah, I just think it zaps your energy. It feels like it chips away at you. And now on to taste. Only 2% of respondents said that taste is the sense that bothers them the most. Quite a few people said there were no flavors that they find particularly unpleasant. That's kind of somewhat surprising to me. I suppose my issues with taste and also with texture were a lot worse as a child. I think as an adult, you just have a lot more control. You can just choose to not eat foods that you don't want to eat. And you know, you don't have to eat or be able to tolerate every food in the world in order to have a healthy diet. And also as a child, again, I think there's more of a sense of uncertainty around food. You maybe don't know what every dish that's put in front of you is, especially if it's a load of stuff mushed together. And so it feels a bit more creepy and unfamiliar than it does as an adult. But here are some of the most upsetting flavors for autistic people, according to my community. Fishy, agreed. Meat in general, particularly beef and pork. Brussels sprouts were called out quite a bit. Yeah, green vegetables in general, just they taste like farts. They taste like they should be poisonous to me, is how I feel. I force them down these days. Often I don't breathe through my nose so I don't have to taste them. Chew, 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 and then drink them down with water. And that's how I have green vegetables these days. I'm like, oh, I don't mind kale. And then I'm there washing each bite down. Maybe I'm not recovered. Fibrous vegetables and wet, crisp vegetables came up quite a lot. I just hate it when vegetables explode with water inside your mouth. I feel like cooked courgette, carrots. I really hate those bags of frozen mixed veg because I feel like they just squirt water all over your mouth. Tomatoes as well also do this. I hate the taste of tomatoes. I really can't stand it when fruits and vegetables have a planty taste. Things are often too planty for me. I like my bananas to be quite ripe, and I absolutely despise peas. We even have emojis about this over on my Patreon Discord server. Bitter foods like grapefruit can be an issue. Some people are actually super tasters, so more sensitive to bitterness. The smell and taste of peanut came up quite a lot on the survey as well. I really like peanut, so I don't relate to that one. Fruit generally, someone said grape. Fucking grape. I mean, fruit can just be so ridiculously inconsistent. You're never quite sure what you're gonna get. Some people said spicy, sour, or sweet foods, overly sweet foods were overwhelming. Pickles and celery came up quite a lot. Onion and garlic and ginger. Mint was attacked quite a lot, and minty toothpaste too. I personally love mint. I often get a mojito. Well, not often. I don't drink alcohol very often, but if I'm getting a cocktail, I'll get a mojito and I'll always eat the mint leaves. Strung cheese, especially blue cheese, was called out. I'm not sure I ever had blue cheese before going vegan. I've had a vegan blue cheese and yeah, it just tasted like mold. Yogurt. There was a phase where my dad and stepmom were like, we all need to have a drinking yogurt in the morning. This is the epitome of health. Yeah, they gave me the ick. Fennel, aniseed, and licorice. Olives obviously can be a bit controversial. Generally, artificial sweeteners. I hate the aftertaste from artificial sweeteners, and dressings and mayo were also called out. In terms of textures, inconsistent textures and having sudden hard bits in food. I think this can often be an issue with meat and was a large part of why I really did not like the texture of meat, and I think it made it a lot easier for me to go vegan. Most vegan mock meats are much more consistent. I wish I'd known that earlier. Yeah, people mentioned grizzly bits, fatty bits in meat, stringy bits in meat. Yeah, also finding bones in fish. You might not like gritty things, such as, foods with protein powder in them, things with a different texture hidden inside them, juices with pulp, juice with bits in, and also yogurt with bits in. I was once trying to practice mindfulness a bit more in my day, and I decided to try and mindfully eat a yogurt, this mango yogurt with bits in it, and it gave me the ick so strongly, and I've never forgotten it. I don't think I could eat that yogurt again. Slimy textures, as you can imagine, were not particularly popular. So mushrooms, again, eggplant, smoked salmon, okra, mushy textures. Yeah, this is probably my least favorite. I cannot stand mashed potato or mushy peas. They used to make me gag as a child, and this fish pie that my mom used to make I hated it because of the fish, but it also had mash on top, and I would just sit there gagging and it would take me forever to eat it. Overcooked pasta was mentioned quite a few times, making the safe food unsafe. Bananas can obviously be mushy. Blueberries sometimes can decide to be mushy. Oh my goodness, cooked spinach. No. Foods that squeak on your teeth. Leeks, for example. Lewis keeps making potato and leek soup. And again, I can eat the leek with potato in the same bite, but when I get too much leek on its own, I often just leave a little pile of leeks at the end because I can't do too much leek in one bite. It's just, I don't like it. Soups, not always great. A chunky soup, not too bad. With bread, again, the firmer texture of the bread can make it easier. You can soak up the soup as well. Fizzy drinks came up. I feel like this is something you either love or you hate as an autistic person. I love sparkling water. I really like the feelings of the bubbles in my mouth, but some people absolutely hate it. Jelly or jello, beans were quite unpopular. Someone said cold oatmeal, and yeah, I agree that things being cold makes the texture stuff even worse. Like a cold soup, no. I'll often go and heat mushy foods numerous times throughout eating them because I need them to be really warm. Otherwise, I don't know, it makes it seem more sloppy. It intensifies the sloppiness. And the sad thing is, when you have these food sensitivities, I think you can often end up feeling like a bad person in some ways. And I feel like people respect those who say, oh, I'll eat anything, the food extroverts, and then maybe kind of look down on the picky eaters, the food introverts. But again, you don't have to enjoy every single food in the world in order to have a healthy diet. There are a few other senses that are often mentioned in relation to autism. Vestibular or balance and movement is one. You might be more likely to become motion sick or become dizzy from turning your head without moving your whole body. If I was seated in school, so my back was facing the board and I had to keep turning my neck to read the board, it would make me feel so sick. Your proprioception might also be affected, so your sense of your own body in relation to other people and objects. Again, you might become overwhelmed if objects or people are very close to you. And finally, there's also interoception, so your awareness of your body's internal signals like hunger, temperature, and pain. Those sensations might be overwhelming and difficult to zone out. Sometimes when something's uncomfortable within my body, it feels just as distracting as having some sort of noise that I can't block out. Or again, you might be hyposensitive, you might be underactive. I think this is quite common for autistic people. You don't notice your own thirst or hunger signals. You don't realize you need the toilet until the very last minute and then you have to run. And you might also not take your pain signals seriously. About 40% of people who answered the survey said they felt they had a high pain tolerance. 21.8% said medium and 18.6% said low. So most people said high, but it was relatively evenly split beyond that. Quite a lot of people said they weren't sure. I mean, yeah, what do you measure it against? I hope this made you feel less alone. It was so interesting going through the survey answers because so often there were identical responses side by side or just a few responses away from each other. And it's just so funny that we're all over the world in very different situations and having a really similar sensory experience in some ways, although of course everybody is different. If you can think of anything that wasn't mentioned here, do leave it in the comments below. That would be super helpful. If you enjoyed this video, you might like the one I made about the many different types of stimming autistic people and ADHDers might do, involving all of the senses, not just movement. And absolutely, if you deal with sensory stuff, please learn about monotropism. I have a video about monotropism. Go to monotropism.org. I feel like it will really help to explain your experience. It's a theory of how autistic minds work, and it's completely life-changing. If you finished everything on here, I do offer 2 exclusive videos a month over on Patreon for all tiers. My lowest tier is $4, and there are currently over 30 videos to catch up on, about 20 hours of content on there. And if you include my podcast, there are 48 hours of extra content to go through. I also have about 100 outtakes clips on there, and everybody who joins my Patreon can access the Discord server, so you can chat to like-minded people. You don't have to be diagnosed autistic to join, you just have to be a nice person. I do try my best to make my Patreon worthwhile because it enables me to do this, and I'm very, very grateful. Lots of exciting things to come over there. And remember, you can get 20% off Loop earplugs with my code LoopX-Megan, all caps. I will leave the link in the description as well. And to everyone who took the time to fill out the survey, thank you so much for your contribution towards this video. Watch the community tab because I'm sure we'll do things like this again in the future. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in my next video very soon. Goodbye!